this full screen. And F11's not working.
Command F.
Beautiful. All right, so CSS transitions, the third dimension. I'm Ben Harrison. I work for a social startup called Queer. We build widgets for websites, comments and polls at the moment. We've just gone live with a public beta, so check us out. What are CSS transitions? Basically, they're for moving stuff with CSS. It goes a little deeper than that. Personally, when I first heard adding this stuff in CSS3, I thought, what's the point? We can do this stuff in JavaScript. But there's other benefits. There's performance, which I'll get to in a moment, and just simplicity of coding this stuff, because we code it in the same way that we're coding all the other style rules. It's compatible with all TM modern browsers. I think it's IE 10 and above, but IE still has some issues. And this presentation itself is built with CSS transitions. My colleague actually mentioned that it looks like Wolfenstein, and that he would totally sponsor a Kickstarter. All right, how do we build them? There's a bunch of CSS properties that we use. Not too many actually. It's very simple. Transform is the first one, so we can add a bunch of transforms to any DOM element. One interesting facet of this is that it moves that element onto its own layer in the rendering tree. That's where we get the performance from, because we can then composite that layer separately from all the other things, and we don't get reflow when we update that. So, for example, we've got translate X, translate Y. Those move things as you would expect, up, down, left, right. And we've got scale, and I can show you a small demo. This box was a little bit bigger before.
CSS does that.
Yeah. So we can move it around. You see that move, and I'll come back to this in a moment. It's worth noting that these translate when you use a percentage, it's based on the node itself. Typically in CSS, it's based on the parent node, so that's a little gotcha. We saw that before with the vertical position. Then we have the 3D transitions. We can add a rotate X, Y, Z, and we can add translate Z. That is, if you take the browser window to be like a camera that's moving things closer to or further away from the camera. And back to the demo. So I can rotate this guy in a bunch of different directions. I'll hide it. And this is an example of a transition we might have to bring an element into the page. It's worth noting, translate Z is distinct from Zindex. Intuitively, for me, it felt like when something has a higher translate Z value, it should appear in front of things that have a lower translate Z value, but that's not the case. They'll appear like they're further away, but the higher Z index will actually appear in front. That's because they're on totally separate layers. There's perspective offset, they're for essentially moving the camera around. We'll get into the details. And then we tie that all together with the transition. So for the transition, we can say, make the transform happen when we change this value over, in this case, a quarter of a second. And there's a bunch of different ways we can make that happen with linear and easing, different types of easing. Unfortunately, they all currently use prefixes, but you can get around that with your CSS preprocessors. I thought I'd mention one weird trick that I came across. Translate 3D is not just for 3D, not only good for 3D transitions, it forces the animation itself to run on the GPU. This, particularly for mobile processors, makes it run a lot faster and a lot smoother. You can also force that with setting a translate Z. And I recently changed a native app for iOS into a web app, and the people who hired me to do so said it actually ran just as fast as the native. So that's a good thing. So what are they good for? If you look around on the internet, you'll see that they're really good for building cubes. Lots and lots of people building cubes. I like to reinvent PowerPoint myself. But I can see them being used for page and gallery transitions, modal windows, and I really like the idea that they would make a good starting point for 3D virtual reality user interfaces. And that's me.
Wow, big round of applause to all of our presenters tonight.